Kendal Hagee podcast. Today, Pastor Michael Fernandez and Miss Rebecca Guajardo are joining us once again.
For podcast number 2.
Podcast number 2. We did not have the opportunity to cover all of the questions that were asked, and a lot more information has come forward. So, guys, let's jump right into it. The last time we led off with relationship questions, and we got to share those with our college, career, and young adults, but there's a lot more that they want to know and we want to answer.
So I have one that I guess is a little, popular in the church to talk about these days with relationships, and that is, what does biblical submission mean, especially for women as wives in relationships? Because a lot of times we don't like that word. We don't like to hear the word, you have to submit to blah, 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 blah. Right. Yeah. So what does that look like?
Okay. Darling?
So while you're married or dating, did you say?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
What does biblical submission mean?
Biblical submission,
right.
meaning submit to your husband's need, right? She will submit to his lead, and
Correct.
he will submit to my need. That's what I always remember Pastor and Miss Diana, teaching us as the women of the church.
From the biblical perspective,
you are the leader.
Bible is
Spiritual
a
authority.
book that teaches mutual submission. Mm-hmm. And this is where you hear people with the modern phrase, we're doing life together. Mm-hmm. The thing that's really important is the together part, and so it teaches mutual submission. A lot of people in the modern world, they want to pretend like the Bible is antiquated, that it suppresses women, right. That, they take text out of context. They'll say things like, Paul said a woman should never speak out in church. Well, yes, he did say that. But the reason he said that is because he was speaking to a Jewish congregation. So whenever you look at what the Bible has to say about submission, it says these things. One, that a man should submit to the needs of his wife. It says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And when you look at the way Christ loved the church, whatever the need of the church was, Christ met the need. Mm-hmm. We needed redemption. He provided redemption. We needed to be healed. He provided healing. We needed provision. He provided provision. How did he meet all those needs? The next verse says he laid his life down. Mm-hmm. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, even to the point of laying your life down. So a husband submits to his wife's need by laying his life down, meaning he prioritizes her needs above his preferences.
Wow. Yes, love that.
And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
Mom needs help with the kids today. My preference is go play golf. I'm going to submit to her need, and I'm not going to go play golf.
That's good.
So there's the masculine version of submission.
Mm-hmm. And it's also I would say as the wife, we need to also share what we need. There's a lot of times that we don't communicate.
There's mutual submission in biblical submission. The way it's been taken out of context, and anytime something's taken out of context, there's always an over adjustment. The way it's taken out of context is the man is in charge, period. And so he got away with a whole lot in terms of suppressing what the Bible calls someone of equal value. God created male, God created female. He sees them equally. People say, well, the Bible says she's a weaker vessel. No. The Bible says that she's different.
Right.
It doesn't say she's weaker. It says she's different. And what men have done in generations past is, I'm in charge, you just have to adjust to it. No. A woman will follow a man off a cliff.
That's right.
If he's meeting her needs.
That's so true.
So there's mutual submission that has to be applied in terms of biblical submission.
Right, and we've confused the word submission, like you said, with oppression, with suppression, with all these negative connotations, when in fact it provides such freedom for women to follow the plan God has for their lives while their husband is submitting to Christ and, leading the relationship.
Well, submission, I if you break the word down, I like the title of John Bevere's book, Undercover. Yes. And I have this statement that I make, that submission is how you accomplish the mission. It doesn't matter what your goal is. If you don't submit to the needs of the goal, you're never going to meet it.
Right.
And so in terms of having a successful marriage, submission is how you accomplish the mission of a successful marriage.
Shout out to John Bevere.
Amen.
That's it.
Amen.
So this question comes in, and it may need a little bit more context, but let me throw it out there anyway. It says, what should I do if I'm engaged and I'm questioning whether or not I should really get married to this person? So maybe a little bit of cold feet, or
I know.
seeing
Why
something.
is she question? Is it a
Well,
why is she questioning?
Yeah, that could mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
Across the board, if you are questioning it before you're getting married, hit pause.
Yes.
So if the individual who is engaged has lost the peace, time out.
Yeah.
Go find out
Why?
what caused the peace to leave. And if you're sitting in, premarital counseling with a pastor, speak to them about it. Speak to your spouse about it, or your fiance, your spouse to be, so that you don't just keep making progress towards this problem without ever, finding a reason for it.
Yeah.
But anytime God's peace leaves, hit the pause
Find
button,
out
find out why.
So it needs to be voiced and not feel like I've gone so far, I have to follow through.
Yeah, they're already voicing
No.
it. They sent
Yeah, I was
Michael the
gonna say,
question, so
They're struggling
That's
with
step
it.
number one, admitting that there is.
yeah,
That's
you
true.
you need to hit pause and say, what are we doing and why are we doing it, and what can
And
we do?
be honest. Talk
Yeah.
to your fiance about it. Say, hey, I'm going through this, and find your pastor and share this with them and figure out what's going on. That's good.
That is good.
So this is a question about you all's courting, dating relationship. How long did you all date before you felt you were ready for marriage?
Not long.
Not long at all. No, because we were talking for about a year. Then we went on our first date January, and we were engaged in March.
Correct. And
So literally,
understand
3
we
months.
were 23,
We were 25.
25 when we got married.
We got married. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we were 23.
Yeah, 23, 24. And so we got married at 25. By the time we started dating, we knew we were looking for a spouse. So, we had already gone to prom.
We were already-
weren't waiting for tuxedo pictures, and
Prom.
I say that kind of, tongue in cheek, because there are people who are in long dating relationships.
Yes.
And I'm like, what are you waiting on? Spring dance? If you're at this age in your life, you both have jobs, you both have completed your education, you are stable. Why do you choose just to date instead of go forward with the relationship of marriage? So Kendall and I started dating in January. We got engaged in March. We were married in October.
So no 8-year engagement.
No.
Then why are they
Yeah.
having an
I-
8-year engagement? I'm wondering because
Well, I
if you're in the
typically-
boundaries, then you're.
I
you're
typically
crossing some
tell
boundaries.
people that
8
long
years?
engagements do not make for great marriages. And the reason for that is because typically the long engagement process is more of a selfish thing. It's about me. It's not about her. And one of the things that helps marriage stay good is passion. And passion burns. Passion burns hot.
Yes.
So Kendall and I were dating. We were passionate. We wanted to get married. We got married. It wasn't like, hey, let's stay together long enough to see if this fire simmers down. And then you just kind of get comfortable.
We
in
had
your
a date when you proposed too. That's another thing. I see
Oh.
people have long engagements after that, and
when
then I'm
she
like,
said yes, I
he
was
said
like,
the date will be October 4th. I'll never forget
Yeah.
your dad.
we were driving
Yeah.
we were driving to go tell my parents, and I told her, I said,
He'd already looked at the calendar.
I said, you need to know. I said, we've already picked a date. And she's like, oh, okay. When will that be? I said,
I'm
we're
thinking-
getting married on October the 4th. And she said, why are we getting married on October the 4th? I said, because that is the only Saturday that is available on the church's calendar, on my calendar, and on
your
Dad's
dad's
calendar
calendar.
between now and next spring. And I'm not waiting to marry you until next spring. I said, we're either getting married October the 4th or we're going down to the Justice of the Peace. And I even told her, this is where we're going to have the reception. This is the photographer. Now, my situation's a little different. The church does several hundred weddings a year, so I kind of know the ropes of how to do this.
Yeah, he knows the process.
But at the same time, we weren't going to sit here and I wasn't getting engaged to find out if I wanted to get married. I was dating because I wanted to get
That's so
married.
true.
I got engaged because it was time.
That's really good. Well, speaking of long engagements, what advice do you guys have for people who are in long distance relationships?
Depends on the circumstance.
Yeah.
I mean, some people were dating and maybe he moved because of a job. And so maybe it's going to be a short term and he's coming back and forth. But I mean, it's hard to do long distance.
It's a sticky situation.
Yeah,
Well,
it
and-
depends
and
on
it goes
how
back
much...
to the why. Because, sometimes I see people in long distance relationships, and again, there's two words that keep coming up in this conversation: selfish and sacrificial. Some long distance relationships are selfish because you don't get to see each other all the time. So in the 2 or 3 days that you do get to see each other, it's wonderful. We love spending
Right,
time
you're only
together.
seeing the best parts of
Yeah,
each other.
it's just great because in this 12 to 24, 48 hour thing that we have, we are going to pay our undivided attention to each other. And then I'm going to get to go back to where I came from, and you're not going to bother me anymore, is really how that's breaking down. And so if that's the kind of relationship you have, I don't know that I highly recommend getting too close because eventually you're going to irritate each other when you turn around and you go, what are you doing here?
You're not used to their presence.
Yeah, it's when you've spent 12 hours with somebody and the second you drop them off, you go, I can't wait to see you again. And I mean, those are the kinds of things that you're looking for in the marriage, dynamic. When you're like, you're going back to wherever you came from in 2 days, isn't that going to be nice?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
So I have one that you both can answer, and that is, what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your relationship?
The biggest lesson is to, I would say, to listen. Sometimes I'm talking in 100 different directions. So instead of asking Matt 5 questions, like you used this in your sermon last Sunday, and I was just sitting there laughing. I thought it was so sweet that my brain, I
know what that means.
Cool. No, it was sweet. You were like,
I thought it was so sweet.
It
That
was
means
real.
I'm gonna pay for it
No,
later.
I seriously, listeners, it was real. I have a tendency to ask a lot of questions at once because my brain is just going in so many different directions. So instead of like taking time to stop and listen for his response and not go to the next question, just be patient. So mine would be patience and listening and understanding.
That's one, and it's a very substantive one because while, again, Kendall will ask a number of questions right away, I won't ask as many questions. I'll just quit listening.
You just tune it out.
Yeah,
just tunes-
exactly.
it
I'll be
tunes out.
quiet, but my eyes are focused on her. She's talking, and my brain is on Jupiter. And so it's listening is a mutual thing that everybody should do, not just in a dating relationship or a marriage relationship. It's responsibility in friendship and those kinds of things as well. One of the greatest lessons that I've learned in our relationship is to understand that everybody thinks they grew up normal.
So true.
Ooh, that is true. Until you see somebody else
Exactly.
and you're like, wow,
so
I'm not normal at
my
all.
marriage to Kendall is a blending of our normal. I grew up in the Hagee household. She grew up in the Young household. As far as we were concerned, we grew up normal. And so when I come into our relationship with my normal and she comes into her relationship with her normal, we have to be willing to blend those two normals because they're not exactly alike. And if I look at her and I go, you're not normal, then we've got a problem. And those have been really kind of the balance of the challenges that we've had. Why do you do it this way? That's not how it's done. And she's saying, well, no, this is how I've always seen it done.
Yeah.
And I've got a decision to make. Do I create space for that? Do I how do I engage there? So it was something in the early part of our marriage for me to go, you know what, there are other ways to approach a day. I don't have to do it the way that it's always been done or the way I've always seen it. We've got to figure out what is our normal.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
So this is my last question, and feel free to answer this in either order, but was there anything specific that you saw the other do that made you feel like, yes, this confirms this is the one?
You go first. I want to hear you. You go first. I went first on the last one.
All right. For me, Kendall was working as an intensive care nurse, but particularly she was working night shift. And so at the time that she and I met, Dad and I were having breakfast every Sunday morning. We'd meet at 6 o'clock up at the Gyms on Blanco in 1604, which is just one exit up from the church. Shout out to Gyms.
Gyms.
Yeah, they're not a sponsor of this program, by the way.
It is where we would see each other.
So this is where we would see each other on Sunday. As Dad and I were walking out to come to church, she would be walking in.
I was coming from the hospital in my scrubs.
Well, and so for the first several weeks, she came in church clothes. And so she was always dressed for church, and so this one particular Sunday we were walking out, and she walks in scrubs, and there was no church makeup, there was no church hair, there was no church clothes.
I would try not to work on Saturday nights because I wanted to be able to go to church the next morning, and so I'd be dressed. But this time I came from work.
Yeah, she came right from work, and so on this particular Sunday, rather than just smile and wave, my dad, being who he is, he was like, he whistled at her, and he was like, honey, get over here. I want to talk to you. And so she came over and she said, yes, sir. And he said, why are you dressed like this? And she said, well, I'm a nurse. And he said, okay. And are you going to work? And she said, no, I'm just getting done with work. And he goes, are you eating breakfast on your way home to go to bed? And she said, no, I just didn't have time to go home and change. I didn't want to miss church. And so for me, I was like, that is some real grit. That's somebody that prioritizes the right things. Church is important to her. And for me, that was like, all right, that was one of the moments where I was like, she could be the one.
Time to buy the ring.
Yeah, we got real close right there.
And mine was when we'd go over to your house as like your family, watching him around his sisters and his parents and praying together as a family and eating together. That was something that I didn't always grow up because my parents both worked, so we didn't have the family dinner time. And I knew that was something that I always wanted to do. And so going over to Matt's and everybody getting into the kitchen and everybody helping with the meal and just the fellowship that they had and celebrated, I was like, this is the type of family man that I want for my husband.
She definitely liked the Mexican aspect.
Yes, I did. I never had guacamole before. My first time was guacamole. I will never forget, Miss Diana said, will you help me make... It was a life change. She was like, will you help me make the guacamole? And I thought, okay, avocados, but how do you make guacamole?
I'm in the
It's so funny. Hey, I am a guacamole queen now.
Yeah, it's something that every white person wonders, but Mexicans only know. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to ask these important questions. For you listeners, we hope that this conversation was something that made a difference in your life today. Again, if you guys want to follow the Matt and Kendal Hagee podcast, you can do that right now. Go and subscribe. Give yourself the opportunity to let this conversation be a part of your routine and your daily life. If you'd like to hear us cover a topic, if there's something that you want to hear us specifically address, feel free to reach out to us. And, for Matt and Kendal, for Michael and Rebecca, we want to thank you for being here with us today. God bless you guys. We look forward to hearing from you again or speaking to you soon on the Matt and Kendal Hagee podcast.